Hey friends, welcome back. So today I'm going to give you an updated review on the Echo Verve skates. So let's do a quick recap of my review. So I reviewed the skates after 3 months of skating them, which is usually less time than I like to spend on them, unless they're an absolute no-go for me. The reason why I stopped at 3 months is because I cracked the shells. And in the 3 months of skating them, I found that these were well-engineered skates. You could tell there was a lot of thought put into them, but I had issues with stiffness and breaking them in, the shock absorption, and then trying to find the right liner to give me the best fit inside the skate. So let's talk about what's happened since I did my review. So Echo sent me a replacement shell, which is basically the lower portion of the skate. I had to reuse the sole plates, reuse the cuffs, reuse the hardware that came with it, and then I put the Kaiser Fluid 4 frames back on them. Another change that I made was I had someone reach out to me and tell me that I really need to try the MyFit Crown Liner 2s in the Echo Verve skate. So I purchased a pair of those, threw them in the skate, and then I've skated these for about 3 months. So let's talk about what changed with the replacement shell and the replacement liner. So basically, I found that the cuff was actually the stiff element within the skate. And once I swapped the shell, it basically picked up where I left off with the flexiness of the skate. So that was really positive for me because, spending 3 months breaking something in and having to start over would be an extremely frustrating experience. And I can report back that that was not the case. The next is with the liner, with how the shell was profiled, I thought putting a thicker liner in there would actually be detrimental. But what I found is that, I was trying to use a very thin liner because I was worried about my foot and the length of the skate, but I was trying to build up height to fill some volume. But by going with a more padded liner, I found that it didn't really change the length too much. It was just a little bit for those first couple sessions, trying to get them broken in where my toe was basically touching the front of the shell. But beyond that, the liners actually fit the shell better for my foot shape than the stock liner and the basically the second skin liners that I was riding. And I tried out a ton of other liners in there too, and for me, these definitely fit and felt the best. And for anybody wondering, my foot is, relatively flat, and it's on the brink of being considered wide and on the brink of being considered normal. So it's about 100 millimeters in width, and, these felt extremely good. So the replacement liner, because it filled the shell better, means I got better responsiveness out of the skate. Because the cuffs was a lot more padded within the liner, it means that, I could tighten up the liner, get the support that I needed, leave the cuff, a little looser than, I was with like the second skins, and then that allowed me to kind of dial in the flex that I needed for these skates to work. The plastic on the skates is stiffer still than, like the new Faction plastics, but I was able to make these work and get, whatever stiffness I needed out of them. So, that I thought was a really positive experience. So when I skated these, I got them for Christmas, and that meant I spent a lot of time skating these in cold winter conditions. And, honestly, that has a lot to do with making a skate feel a little stiffer than it does in the summertime. And I took these out to a park when it was like 100 degrees out, and these things turned into some of the flexiest skates in the world. So, I think that is something that is going to, play an impact on your experience with these skates too, is whether you're skating them in a cold condition or a hot condition. Obviously the best middle ground is, kind of when it's like the 70, 80s temperatures. But yeah, when it's 100 degrees, super, super soft and flexy. When you're at like 20 degrees, these things definitely do feel a little more stiff and, firm, just when skating them. Yeah, so one thing I want to mention too is that with going back to the crown liner, because it is a higher volume liner, I did have to take out the wrecked insoles, just because my foot wouldn't fit in there with them. And then I went back to the FP heel savers combined with the dead shock absorber. So the dead is like a little squishier, the FP is little more firm. So with those two combined, it basically gave me like the perfect shock absorption, which really helped resolve, that was something I dialed in just right before I cracked the shell. So I went back to that and it was still a great experience. All right, so let me give you my closing thoughts on these skates. So, I still feel that they put a lot of design and thought and consideration into these skates, which is very appreciated. To me, it was very obvious too that they spent a lot of time engineering the boot, trying to get a well engineered frame, and then they had to make sacrifices with like the wheels and the liner, shock absorber, to get it to the price point that they wanted. So I think that is something that you need to consider when buying these skates, is that the shell is going to be really premium, liners are going to be decent, wheels aren't going to be the best, frames, they're pretty decent for the price point too. And it's good that they've taken feedback, and in the future they're going to be making some adjustments to the skates to help improve the overall experience based on some feedback that they've gotten from reviews. So I do want to say that the last 3 months on these skates has drastically changed from my first 3 months. And a lot of that was due to getting the shells broken in and having the right liner and shock absorbers all combined together. And I think it is a good skate at a good price point. I do think you will need to make some upgrades, and depending on what your fit and shock absorption needs are. But I will also say that if you buy these skates, you can expect them to be stiff, for the first, couple months as they dial and break in. And then, they are going to be a lot better to dial into what your needs are. So it's one of those that is, to me, kind of an investment project skate. But I found that it was worth the experience. I really enjoyed the last 3 months on these and would not change it for the world. So I think that speaks pretty highly that Echo sent me replacement shells, that I was able to get a liner in there, shock absorbers that basically dialed in my experience. And I wanted to pass along what my experience was to help anybody else who wants to try these out or maybe are going through some of the same issues that I had. So hopefully that's all been very helpful for you. All right, well, that wraps up today's updated review on the Echo Verve skates. If you've got any questions, comments, feel free to drop me a line. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks all for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.